No, I can. I get this. I can't get any sound.
Respectful of the kid. I want to have a conversation with the kid, but I also don't want that to be the first conversation I have with the kid is about talking to the media. So does that make sense, everybody? So, that answers that question for you guys. We expect to have DeLuca, Wormley, and Kimber back. I don't have a whole lot more information than that right now. Obviously, the game was Saturday. Sunday is a jog through. Monday's the off day. So we expect those guys back, but I don't have that information for you right now either. You're talking about the game, just kind of recapping some things. We won most of the critical stats, the turnover battle, the explosive play battle, the third down battle, the sack battle, the drive start battle. So we were able to, win those penalties. After the game, I actually thought we had won that statistic because we had less penalties, but we had more penalty yards. So we really did not. And then I think you guys saw we started to announce the players of the game, so you guys have already seen that. One of the things that I talked to the team about is the importance of us taking a significant step this week and not having to be one of those teams that you see all over the country that have to have a setback first before they make a wake-up call and take a significant step. So we need to do that this week. Very, very important for us. And obviously getting into UCLA. One of the things that was interesting that I was unaware of when you kind of first start kind of doing your homework on this opponent is in our last 5 matchups against UCLA, we're 1-4, which I did not expect that. Coach Foster obviously, got a lot of history at UCLA. Although he's a first-year head coach, he's got a ton of history there, obviously. A team that is still kind of trying to find their way offensively, defensively, and special teams. You see them do some really nice things at times. Played really, really well against Hawaii, did some things against Indiana, LSU, and Oregon that were impressive at times. But obviously, it is going to be a challenge for us with them coming into our place. Also them dealing with travel, just like we're going to be dealing with in the future. That will factor in as well. I've known Eric Bieniemy professionally for a long time. As the offensive coordinator, he's got as good of a resume as there is. 23 years of experience, first year as the offensive coordinator at UCLA. They do a ton of really good things, creative. You're going to see 11 personnel, you're going to see 12 personnel, you're going to see 21 personnel, 22 personnel, all of it. Very pro style in kind of how they operate. The quarterback, who is a Washington transfer, we've been impressed with him, Ethan Garbers. The running back is another big back, 220 pounds, 6'2", number 25, TJ Harden. We've been impressed with him. And then wide receiver transfer from Notre Dame, number 1, Rico Flores. All three of those guys have flashed on tape up to this point. And then their defense and defensive coordinator, Ikaiko Malloy. I've also known Ikaiko for a decent amount of time. 24 years of doing this. Their defensive coordinator last year left, Penn State grad, and went to USC, who we know well, and Ikaika was promoted from within. I think in a large part, not only because of his background and his experience, but also because they wanted to keep the system similar, and they'd had a ton of success. Guys that we've been impressed with is number 49, Carson Swessinger. Number 7, KJ Wallace, is a Georgia Tech transfer. Linebacker number 20, Kane Medrano. And then defensive tackle number 93, who's a USC transfer, Jay Toia. Defensive end number 44, Devin Apu. As a Notre Dame transfer, and we've been impressed with him as well. So they are a good-looking team physically on the hoof. And then on special teams, Cody Whitfield is their special teams coordinator. His first year in this role, we have been impressed with their kicker, Mateen Bagoni. He's made 8 of 9 field goals with a long of 54. So obviously, they got tremendous range in that area. And then just to kind of give you guys some updates, red, yellow, green, nothing has really changed at this point. Luke Reynolds is a go as a green. Cooper Cousins is a go as a green. And Dewan Lane, Dele Lane is a go as a green. And the rest of those guys are kind of transitioning from yellow to green, possibly depending on how the season goes. So open up the questions.
Let's go to Rich Garcella and then Mike Gross.
Good afternoon. James, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, but you're not showing up on the screen for some reason. You're breaking up a little bit.
Okay. Before I ask, you missed the first 2 minutes of your audio.
Yeah, you're breaking up.
Rich, I'll try going back to you in a second. Let's go to Mike Gross.
James, good afternoon.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Wait, that sounds weird, doesn't it? Talking about the officials last on Saturday night, you said, I just want to feel like it's being called both ways, which that sounds a little bit beyond. I disagree with this call or whatever. So has there been any communication with the conference?
Wait. Say this again. Say your question in your statement you made.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I heard you. I just want to make sure I understand what you're.
Post game Saturday night. You said I just want to feel like it's being called those ways, which seems to go beyond just saying, well, I disagree with this call or so forth. So has there been any communication with the conference about the officiating? And if there hasn't, do you think there should be?
Yeah, I don't know if I would characterize it the way you just characterized it. I wouldn't connect the dots the way you just did. There's always communication with the conference. We turn in the plays that we disagree with. They respond back to us. We turn in plays before our next game, things that we're seeing on film that we're concerned with. So there's constant communication. We got to do a better job of being more disciplined and handle the things that we need to handle. First of all, priority number 1 is us. It's been that way my whole career, and specifically here at Penn State. So I want to be very, very clear on that. But yeah, the way you're characterizing the statement I made, I wouldn't characterize it that way.
Let's try Rich again.
James, can you hear me now?
Yeah, Rich, I apologize. I think it was on us because the system was kind of wacky for Mike as well. So sorry about that.
That's okay. Before I ask my question, can you go over what you said before you started talking about UCLA? Because we didn't hear it.
Yeah, so obviously our system is a mess. What didn't you hear? Oh, okay. So the injury stuff that I talked, was that what you didn't hear, Rich?
I didn't hear anything. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Rich. So Cam Wallace is out. He's got a long-term injury. And what I was talking about with the people in the room is I want you guys to kind of understand that process a little bit. I always want to be respectful of the young men and their injury and make sure that them and their family are comfortable with me talking about that. But the other thing is, because typically it's the more significant injuries, right? I don't really want my first conversation with the kid to be, hey, can I talk to the media? I'd like to, show him and demonstrate that my concern is for him and make sure he's okay. Give it a day or two before I have a conversation about addressing the media. So sometimes you guys ask, and I get that you have to ask, but that's why I'm waiting, is I don't want my first conversation to be about, addressing and answering your guys' questions. So that's what I was talking about. And then I think I said DeLuca, Wormley, and Kimber were anticipating those guys being back, but it's hard for me to say on a Monday press conference when today's the off day and yesterday was a walkthrough. You still got to kind of see them on Tuesday and Wednesday, but we're anticipating those guys being back.
Okay. How would you say the offensive line has played?
You broke up again.
How would you say your offensive line played to this point?
Just so you know, talking slower doesn't help with the breaking up. Yeah. It's like people say, I don't understand English, so you talk louder or slower. So I think all things considered, right? The fact that we had three guys that are playing in the NFL right now off of last year's team, I think very well. And I think that's a credit to Coach Troutwine and Frank Leonard and Bill Quaisert. I think those guys have done a real good job, as well as the players. I think Nick Dawkins is a big storyline there as well. A guy that's been kind of waiting for his opportunity and his time. And, we had high expectations for him, and I actually think he's probably playing better than we anticipated, not only physically but also mentally in terms of calls and leadership. He's been really good. So I think, you look last week. I got a ton of respect for Illinois and Brett Bielema, what he's been able to do kind of throughout his career, and it's been built based on fronts, front seven on defense and O-line and tight ends and running game. That running back, I don't know if you guys got a chance to see him close up. I mean, he was a specimen, like 250 pounds, and I thought we played very well up front against a team that is built to win games in the Big Ten on their fronts. It's one thing, like our defense, it's one thing to hold a team to, whatever it was, 60 yards or whatever it was.
39.
Yeah.
For the five from the.
No, rushing. How many yards did they have rushing?
36.
Yeah, 36 yards rushing. It's one thing to hold a team for 36 yards rushing. It's another thing to do it against a team that's committed to running the ball. And same thing with their front seven. They were committed to not giving up explosive plays, so they played more cover three and less man than we expected. And with that cover three, it allows you to get another safety in the box. So they were committed to stopping the run and not giving up explosive plays. That was the game plan from my perspective. And we were able to run the ball and do it in a very physical way. Not only the O-line, to answer your question, but also the running backs. There was some punishing runs that Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and and Tyler Warren as well. There were some physical runs. So I've been pleased with that group.
Let's go to Mark Wogenrich and then Frank Bodani.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, James. How
Has
Katron
Allen
specifically progressed as a player and person in your program since his freshman year?
Yeah, I'm really proud of Katron in so many different ways. And to be honest with you, Katron, as always, it's really just kind of maybe some bad luck, but historically with his time here, he's always had some lingering injury in the off season that I think is hurt some of his development. He's one of the more natural football players that we got. It was really that way when he showed up on campus. And don't get me wrong, he's worked very hard at his development, but he's just missed a lot of time in the off season. So, to see him playing the way he's playing right now is awesome. And then also to see him and Nick, they're both fairly quiet guys, very different kind of personalities, but both quiet. And to show them, showing emotion and having fun and being supportive of each other as well as the O-line. I thought that play, that Katron scored on, and, he does the whole deal where he's kicking down the door, and the whole offense did that with him. I thought that was a very telling of how connected our offense is and how connected our team is. But I'm proud of him. He's doing really, really well in school. I was at IMG a few weeks ago bragging on him to everybody on campus, just how well he's doing. He's doing really well in school. He's a great teammate. He's beloved by his teammates. He's playing really well, very, very productive. I'm proud of him. He's really growing up. And I think we've challenged him there as well, in terms of his leadership, how communicative he is. He's really growing in all areas, and I'm very proud of him. And I was back there at IMG telling everybody on that campus how proud they should be of him, too.
Last question from Zoom, Frank Bodani.
Hi, James.
Hey, Frank.
Could you please evaluate the punt return situation and the production there so far? And who is Hayden's maybe toughest challenger there at this point?
Yeah, so Caden suffered a injury during training camp. That's why you guys see hasn't been playing much wide receiver, and we had anticipated him having a pretty big role for us on offense. So he had an injury, and early on we weren't sure if he was going to be able to go. And then he got cleared, and it was him getting confident, back to being out there, and really kind of the plan for the first couple of games was to just have him catch the ball, because we had a ton of confidence that he would catch the ball, and predominantly fair catch the ball. While he was injured, we had a ton of different guys back there to catch the ball, decision making, when to fair catch it, when not to, backed up punt, when you're going to let it go in the end zone, when you're going to catch it, being able to advance it. Some really good athletes, but that's a unique job, and that's a unique skill set. I think you also saw we used Jake Spencer. He was another guy that's caught punts in college games before. But obviously we put him in on that one, and the ball got to the ground. So, that obviously created some challenges for us. So we've had a bunch of competitions for somebody else while Caden was getting healthy, and no one really took the job. So we were still kind of at a point where having Caden for the most part catch and fair catch. Zion Tracy's a guy that we think is close. As you guys know, he's got a background from high school as not only a returner but also a wide receiver. And we were hoping that he would be the guy during that time, and it just hadn't happened during practice. But right now, Zion's doing some really good things on defense and really doing some good things on special teams and gaining a ton of confidence. So, we'll see how that goes this week. But that's why you're seeing what you're seeing. Caden had an injury during training camp that limited what he could do as a receiver as well as a return man.
Go to questions in the room. We'll start with Mark.
How are you today, James?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Kobe told us that Dan Connor is the guy in his ear in the helmet communication. What makes Dan the right guy for that? And can you just take us through what you see his kind of trajectory as a coach is?
Yeah, I think Dan's got a very, very bright future. Dan's a unique guy. He really is. He don't say a whole lot, but when he speaks, everybody listens. He's got great perspective on college football. He's got great perspective on the state of Pennsylvania. He's got great perspective on the NFL and what it takes to be successful at that level. And obviously, he's got unique Penn State experience. So he's been a really good hire and extremely valuable. And you're also talking about a guy who's been a defense coordinator in college before, and I think there's value in that. But I think the headset, as you guys have heard me talk about, that's taken some time to kind of work through the kinks and what's best for Penn State. So, the last two games, Tom has gone up into the booth, and that's been a positive. But on top of that, in terms of, like we talked about, the best place to call a game and that role and that job description, that was just another thing that Tom didn't want to necessarily manage. So, Dan was an option to talk to the linebackers. He dealt with it in the NFL, what he liked in terms of communication in the NFL. What you find is sometimes coaches can give you too much information. So tell them just what they need to hear. The defensive call, maybe a few more things, but not a whole lot more than that. That's what our linebackers wanted. That's what Dan was comfortable doing. And Tom, it just allows him to just call the game and not have to worry about also communicating with the linebacker on the field as well. So we've done that the last 2 weeks. I think that's been good for us. I think that's been good for our defense. I think it's been good for Kobe. I think it's been good for Dan and Tom. And as we've been kind of working through, this technology piece, we've had some of that on offense that we've had to work through, and some of that on defense. But I think we're getting to a good spot now. And what's the best way for Penn State to do it? I think it's going to be different at every school and every place based on the personalities and the team.
Let's go to Tyler.
Hey, James. How are
Hey,
you?
Tyler. Good. How are you?
Good. I'm curious how you would describe what you saw from Abdul Carter on Saturday night and overall through 9 months of collaboration between you and Abdul and Dion and Tom. How do you feel like you're positioned to maximize his skill set the remainder of the season?
Yeah, I think the good thing is I think it's just going to get better, right? The transition from linebacker defensive end is a significant one. He's done some really good things already. But I think as he gets more comfortable there, and then like you saw last week, we start to put more on his plate where we're doing different things, whether it's just one time lining him up on the left, another time lining him up on the right at defensive end, just that alone, so they can't game plan him, know where exactly he's going to be, or whether it's having him spy the quarterback and add on in the blitz. or whether it is lining him up over to center or over to guard, or trying to get him matched up on linebackers, getting him matched up on running backs, which is what, the offense doesn't want to happen. So I think as this goes on, as he continues to get more comfortable playing defensive end, but then as the coaches find more and more creative ways to use them, I think that's the exciting part, right? That's the fun part, is I think you're just going to see him become more and more impactful each week.
Let's go to John.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good, John. How are you?
Doing good. Given some of the struggles in the kicking game in-game, how does that impact your offensive aggressiveness and your decision-making? And are those decisions solely yours, or is that something that you and Andy talk about when it comes to fourth downs and, how you're calling third downs?
Yeah, so those things we typically discuss, during the week. We have an overall kind of philosophy, but then we get together as coordinators on Monday and kind of talk through these things, how we want to play this opponent. Like, I guess, for example, last week, early in the game, 4th and 1, it was obvious that the stadium wanted us to go for it. And I would say in a lot of games, I probably would have. But when you're playing a team like Illinois and Brett Bielema, where they are a field position team, it's all about field position with them. It's all about playing great defense. It's all about playing great special teams. Very like Iowa. You would play Iowa the same way. You want to force them to go the long field. You feel like defensively, even with a punt, you feel like defensively you should still be able to get the ball back in really good field position. But it's going to be a field position type game. So that's really what predicated that decision. In terms of going for it on fourth down on offense, I always want Andy to have his call ready. After third down, or once he's made the third down call, I want him to kind of get in his fourth down call. I've already told him on first down what is a go, so we can handle our sequencing in terms of how we call the offense. But then I'll usually click over to Tom on defense, like I've always done with all the defensive coordinators, and say, hey, what's your thoughts here? I'm thinking about going for it here. What's your thoughts? Because the result of that play, the defense is going to have to deal with. So I always like to get their feedback. I did that with Manny and Brent as well. But ultimately, it's going to be my call.
In the back, T. Frank.
Hey, James, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. You said in your opening statement, I think you said we can't wait to take a significant step. I hope I didn't misquote you there. What did you mean by that? And what did you not see on Saturday that you had wanted to going into that game?
No, I guess what I'm saying is we got to get better each week. Like, individually and collectively, we've got to get better. There's no doubt about that. And what I'm saying is I don't want to be one of these teams that waits until you have a loss for the wake-up call to happen, and now you start doing all the little extra things and getting things corrected. I mean, the obvious one that we haven't gotten corrected yet is penalties, right? That's just making things harder than it needs to be on offense. It's making things harder than it needs to be on defense. And we have been a disciplined team. So we need to get that fixed. And that's probably I was talking about in general, but when you talk about specifics, that was my message to the team is you take the penalties out of that game, the ones that we can control. Then that game probably wasn't as hard as it needed to be. And like what happened in the second half, the game and the score gets out of whack, and you force them out of their traditional game plan. That game was going exactly how they wanted it to go for a long time. And then what happens is we're able to get, a more significant lead. Now they have to play a style of play they don't want to play, and then all the sacks come. If that doesn't happen, we don't get the sacks, and then you guys are asking me after the game where we haven't gotten pressure on the quarterback. It's because of the style of game and how the game was going. So it's those things that I'm talking about. In general, we got to get better. We shouldn't have to have a setback. We got to just make sure we're not becoming complacent and get better every single week individually and collectively. But then also the areas that are obvious that we need to get cleaned up, like penalties, we need to get them cleaned up. Can't just keep talking about it. You guys don't want to hear it. The fans don't want to hear me just keep talking about it. We want it fixed. And ultimately, as coaches, we got to make sure that happens. But also the players have to make sure that happens.
Audrey?
Hey, James. Good afternoon.
Hey, Audrey, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. When you kind of look at your kicking situation, where you guys are at, I guess, how will you kind of go through that this week, and what maybe are you seeing in practice? Like, is it different in practice than it is in games with those guys, or where do you kind of?
Yes. Yeah, it's different. I mean, yeah, well, first of all, we're talking about kicking, right? It's not kicking it because we've been punting the ball fairly well. We've been kicking off fairly well. It's field goals. But the question was, are we kicking better in practice than we are in the game? Yeah, I mean, obviously we decide who the starter is at every position based on practice. And so yeah, Sander had won the job. He had won the job during training camp. He had won the job, this season. All the data and the statistics back that up. During the spring, it was a closer battle, and then Sander just slowly but surely took the lead. But it was close. It was close. But I think everybody felt comfortable that was the right decision. So, we'll factor all of that in this week in making the decision. It will be a competition, but it won't just be a competition just based on just practice data alone. You have to factor in the game data as well. But we'll go from there. But yeah, it's obviously, he was the starting kicker for a reason, and up to this point, or at least before that, most of the data we had was practice data.
Let's go to Neil in the front.
Hi, James.
Hey, Neil.
Wondering with UCLA, USC, between you and your staff, like how much intel with colleagues that you typically gather, and the fact that they're on the West Coast, how much that has maybe changed or challenged between you and your assistants that wouldn't maybe have as many relationships out there as you have in the East?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think our approach when it comes to scouting our opponents is the same. Just like in your guys' profession, our profession's the same way. It's a small world. I mean, you got a lot of contacts and connections of where you're trying to get information from. But ultimately, it's really about the film, right? It's getting the film. It's getting the film broken down. It's running all the data to find out what the tendencies are, and then building your game plan from there. That's really the majority of what we do. The stuff I would say that you're asking is really more about that. I think to answer your question is significant is talking to buddies and friends that have done the cross country travel, and you do all this planning. Okay, what did you learn? Okay, you did all this planning and then you actually did it. What did you learn and what would you do differently next time? And, asking a ton of those questions. We did a lot of it ahead of time with NFL teams and other college teams that have done that type of travel. But then also, this year being able to talk to other teams and letting our ops people talk to other ops people, talking to head coaches that are friends and saying, hey, what did you learn from it after doing it now for maybe the first time in Big Ten play? So that's where I think maybe things are different. The game planning and the scouting doesn't change a whole lot based on those opponents.
Time for two more. Let's go.
Were you going to say something else?
Did you guys figure out when you're leaving next week?
Yeah, Thursday.
Got time for two more. Daniel?
Good afternoon, James.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing well. We saw Dakari get the start at linebacker on Saturday night and played a significant number of snaps. How would you evaluate how he came out of that game and in that development going from safety to linebacker at this point?
Yeah, just proud of him. You know, the light has really gone on for him, and that happens for players at different points in their career. It started like most of them on special teams. He was having success on special teams. That success has bled into defense, and he's having success there. The transition from safety to linebacker is something that he's embraced and trusted us on. And I think he's having a lot of fun right now playing football and having success. And he's been acknowledged publicly multiple times in front of his peers about how well he's doing and how proud of him we are. And that's not an easy transition. Just like we talk about Abdul going from linebacker to DN, that's a very different world. And I think it's obvious that this is the right position for him, and he's doing some really, really good things. So very, very proud of him. Again, the exciting thing is, this is really his first time doing it, so he's just going to get better as he gains experience and knowledge. But we're excited about him at that position and on special teams. He's really doing some nice things for us. And with Dom being out last week, he had to. With hopefully having Dom back this week, it creates some flexibility and hopefully a really good rotation with some of those guys.
Last question, Mike.
Hi, James.
Hey, Mike.
You said on Saturday was really interesting about the team discipline and meetings and notes, kind of a two-part one. I'm sure you've shared that with the guys, and is it going too far to tie that? Years ago, after the Ohio State loss, you also made mention of something like that. How do those things transfer and translate for you?
Yeah, I think they always translate. I don't know about the reference you made there, but I think the point, I feel very strongly about it. Talked about it with the staff, talked about it with our team is discipline that shows up on game day is tied to discipline that shows up in practice, that is tied to discipline with going to practice and going to class and not showing up on lists and being on time and sitting in the front row and taking notes and study hall and meals and just all of the responsibilities that they have on their plate. Discipline in those areas translates to the field, and coaches have been talking about those things forever. So, yeah, I think there's a correlation. There always has been. So, we need to get those things buttoned up. It's always a challenge when you got 120 18 to 22-year-old males that are still figuring out. The college experience is difficult for normal students, let alone student athletes that are trying to balance both things. But yeah, that's something that I've always believed and always preached. And that's not just this year. That's been every year. That is a challenge to get 18 and 22-year-old males to consistently do what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it, and those things do translate to the field. I believe that wholeheartedly.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Thank you.